With just 2 weeks to go in the regular season, we have a new number 1 team in the rankings who takes the top spot for the first time this season. Hi everyone, I'm Wheels, back with another week of going through the new D1 Baseball Top 25. Entering the rankings at 25 is UC Santa Barbara. They're 17-4 in Big West games, which is good enough for first in the conference, now ahead of UC Irvine. That's significant since the Big West doesn't start having annual baseball conference tournaments until next year, so they actually have 3 more weekends of regular season play, with the first place team getting the auto bid. After falling out of the rankings last week, Oregon re-enters at 24 after winning their series over now previously ranked Utah. They're one of 3 teams who entered the rankings this week. NC State drops to 23 after a 1-2 week that included a series split at Florida State. The middle game was rained out, and since there was a travel curfew on Sunday, they couldn't play a doubleheader. Louisiana drops to 22 in the rankings. They lost 2 out of 3 on the road against Troy, who enters the rankings at 21. The Trojans will have a rematch from the winner's bracket of last year's Tuscaloosa Regional on Tuesday against Alabama, who happens to be one of 3 teams who dropped from the rankings this week. I also mentioned Utah earlier, and the third team that dropped out is Vanderbilt, who I want to spend a little time talking about. The Commodores are in a little bit of a slump right now, and with their final 6 SEC games all being against teams ranked in the top 5, the questions surrounding them have quickly gone from will they host to will they make the tournament at all. At 11-13 in conference games, they've got some work to do with 2 weekends left. They need to win at least 2 more SEC games to feel decently about getting in, but at the same time, you're risking it by going into Selection Monday with only 13 wins. 14 would make you feel pretty good about your chances, and anything more than that would probably put you back into the hosting conversation depending on how things go in Hoover. But right now, the focus just has to be on taking things one day at a time and stopping the bleeding. There's going to be bad days at the ballpark, but even losing 2 out of 3 is a heck of a lot better than getting swept. Right now, I think they just need to go out there and play with a lead. They've fallen behind 4-0 or worse in 6 straight games, with the only win in that stretch coming in extras against Tennessee Tech in the midweek. They face Louisville this Tuesday before welcoming the red-hot Tennessee Vols to town over the weekend. Things are looking a little bit dark right now, but this is baseball, and things can change quickly. Good teams are able to hit the reset button and respond to adversity. We're going to find out what the Vandy boys are made of these next couple weeks, because their streak of 17 straight regional appearances, the longest active streak in college baseball, is on the line. I'm still confident in this Vanderbilt baseball team and believe they can go on a run to close out the season. Opening up the top 20 in the rankings is Indiana State, who improved their record in Missouri Valley Conference games to 17-4 with a sweep of Belmont. The Sycamores are putting themselves into contention to host a regional for a second consecutive year. Oklahoma State dropped to 19 after losing 2 out of 3 to Texas, who somehow is still not in the rankings despite being second in the Big 12 and winning 7 of 8 conference series. It was a 2-2 week overall for the Oklahoma State Cowboys, which included a historic 4 home run game in the midweek against Wichita State. One spot ahead of them is Oklahoma, who sits at the top of the Big 12 standings by 3 games. I'll be honest, it is kind of surprising that there aren't any Big 12 teams in a hosting position right now, but that will likely change over the next couple of weeks. Arizona moved back up a few spots to 17 after sweeping Stanford, who's actually sitting 2 games under 500 in Pac-12 play. Arizona is now 17-7 in conference games, which is good enough for a 2-game lead in the standings with 2 weeks to go. It is kind of funny to look at their conference standings and see that the third place team is by far the highest ranked in the Pac-12, while the second place team isn't ranked at all, but that just shows how rankings and standings are independent of each other. Staying in the all-important top 16 is UC Irvine, though their hosting chances took a massive nosedive after losing 2 out of 3 to Cal Poly. They still have 3 more weekends to boost their resume, but not having a conference tournament doesn't do them any favors. Moving into a hosting position is Georgia, who look dominant in their sweep of Vandy. With a conference record over 500, an RPI of 5, and the 9th toughest strength of schedule, this is looking like a team that's going to host in regionals. They face South Carolina this upcoming weekend, who I'll talk about in a little bit, but it feels like whoever wins that series will be a lock to host. At 14 is Mississippi State, who further strengthened their hosting resume with a series win over Alabama. I'm really excited about the idea of Mississippi State hosting this year. Even though I haven't been there yet, they have one of the best ballpark atmospheres in the country, and college baseball is better when State gets to play home games in June. At 13 is South Carolina, who I mentioned before hosts Georgia in a huge series that starts on Thursday. They have a 13-11 conference record as well, so you'd think in both scenarios a 3-3 record to finish might be enough to host. South Carolina does wrap up the season with a series at Tennessee though, so they probably want to get the heavy lifting done before heading to Knoxville. The next 5 teams in the rankings all come from the ACC, with Wake Forest starting things off at number 12. Like the SEC, the ACC also plays 30 conference games a year, though they start a week earlier, which gives teams teams one open weekend to play a non-conference opponent. Wake swept Western Carolina to finish off a 5-0 week, and they now look ahead to a huge series with Clemson that will go a long way towards determining whether or not they'll be a host. At 11 is North Carolina, who won a couple of midweek matchups, but didn't play anyone over the weekend. Sometimes it's better this time of year to just take a week off and give everyone some rest ahead of the postseason. Don't say this to Atlanta Braves fans, though. Before the top 10, as always, it's prediction time. I narrowly avoided my first sub-500 week of the season, though a tie is now added to the record, which complicates things a bit. I purposely predict an odd number of series every weekend to avoid it being a wash, but a rainout in Tallahassee allowed Florida State and NC State to have a series split, which gave me a 5-5-1 record in predictions last week, which brings the overall season record to 46-30-1. This week, I have South Carolina over Georgia, Wake Forest over Clemson, Florida over Kentucky, Virginia over NC State, Illinois over Iowa, Indiana over Nebraska, Oklahoma State over Texas Tech, LSU over Alabama, Arkansas over Mississippi State, Texas A&M over Ole Miss, and then there's Tennessee against Vanderbilt. Two teams heading in different directions right now. Let me say this though, last year when these teams played, it was a slumping unranked team hosting a red-hot top 5 team, and it ended in a sweep for the home team who then went on a crazy run to Omaha. History does tend to repeat itself, so I think this weekend Vanderbilt will not only break their 7-game losing streak against Tennessee, but they'll find a way to squeak out a series win as well. Vanderbilt over Tennessee. Please don't hate me for this, Vols fans. I know there's a lot of you watching right now. I've got a feeling you'll be pretty happy by the end of this video though. Okay, now the top 10. Virginia is at 10 and Duke is at 9. Both teams played just 2 games last week, as Virginia won both in the midweek and Duke swept a Sunday doubleheader with Longwood. Nothing really changed for either team since last week, except that each of their rankings moved up a spot after UC Irvine fell out of the top 10. Florida State actually moves down 1 spot after a 1-1 week where they split 2 games with NC State. This is less about them moving down and more about another team moving up, as the next 2 teams I'll mention also moved down 1 spot after winning their weekend series. Oregon State is now at 7 after a 2-2 week. They lost that non-conference midweek with Oregon, but responded with a series win over Washington State on the road. At 6 is East Carolina, who improved their conference record to 16-5 with a series win over South Florida. Arkansas drops to 5 after losing a series at Kentucky. They were looking pretty good after winning game 1 of the series pretty convincingly, but Kentucky responded really well to win the final 2 games, which moves them back up to 4 and likely solidifies their spot as a top 8 national seed. They also have the best record in the SEC with 2 weekends to go. Texas A&M drops out of the top spot, moving down to 3 after losing a series to a resurgent LSU team. The Tigers seemed out of it a few weeks ago when they were just 3-12 in conference games, but 3 straight series wins gives them a chance to make the tournament. They'll need to finish at least 4-2 if they're going to make it though. Texas A&M will play a second straight road series next weekend as they'll face an Ole Miss team looking to stay in postseason contention and then wrap up the season with a top 5 matchup at home against Arkansas. A 3-3 or 4-2 finish for the Aggies will lock up their spot in the top 8. Coming in at number 2 is the Clemson Tigers. This is their highest ranking of the season, and they'll face the only ACC team that's been ranked in a higher spot all season next weekend, as they go on the road to play Wake Forest, which actually falls in the middle of a 5-game road trip for the Tigers. And now, the number 1 team in the country for the first time this season is the Tennessee Volunteers. This is definitely the best team in the country right now. They hit a ton of home runs, their pitching has been consistent, and they know how to win ball games. They've won 7 straight SEC series and have put themselves in a position to have the number 1 ranking for the NCAA tournament for the 2nd time in 3 years. After hearing all this, I know you're all thinking, Wheels, why the heck did you pick them to lose their series this weekend? Listen, baseball's a funny game. Sometimes you just gotta expect the unexpected. Even if they do lose this series, they're pretty safely in the top 8 and can look forward to hosting in the postseason all the way until Omaha. And with that, we have another week of rankings. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.